rise above the static, dissecting issues diplomatic. With mics in hand, they brave the storm of clashing views and norms transform. The Pundits Podcast, bold and true, shining lights on red and blue. Through heated takes and reasoned thought, they seek the truth that can't be bought. From climate change to foreign ties, they pause the spinning and sift the lies. No stone unturned, no topic taboo, as left and right come into view. The Pundits Podcast, bold and true, shining lights on red and blue. Through heated takes and reasoned thought, they seek the truth that can't be bought. From climate change to foreign ties, they parse the spin and sift the lies. No stone unturned, no topic taboo, as left and right come into view. The Pundits Podcast, bold and true, shining lights on red and blue. Through heated takes and reasoned thought, they seek the truth that can't be bought. In times of strife when tensions flare, their steady voices fill the air. With wisdom gained from years gone by, and hopes for brighter days tonight, the Pundits Podcast marches on their epic quest, not yet done, to understand our changing world and keep democracy's flag unfurled.
Hey everybody, this is Razib with The Conversation with Josiah Neely of R Street. Again, I do want to remind you guys, can you please rate and review us? We need some more of those on Apple or Spotify, wherever you listen to us. And please share our links if you are on Substack. And we really appreciate it if you are a paid subscriber. Really appreciate those of you who are listening to our whole conversation, which, we're pretty much planning to do this every week, and just like I think we have a kind of a groove. But if you have any comments, improvements, topics you want to address, just drop them into the comments or tweet at us. Probably easiest way to contact us. And so we're gonna just get into it. I will start because this is more of a Razib topic, as some of you probably can guess. There are some more Razib topics and more Josiah topics. OpenAI has seen Mira Murati resign, or she's phasing out, consciously uncoupling from her position as CTO at OpenAI. For those of you who, and I know some of you are not tech aficionados, OpenAI is, I'll say it is the Netscape of artificial intelligence. Insofar as a couple of years ago, it really blew open the lid on the field by creating a chat interface with their GPT framework. So the GPT framework is basically just a large language model, and it's a predictive model based on the text you put in. This has been around for a couple of years. The technology has been around for a couple of years, and they had an API, application programming interface, and that's just for nerds. So, it's pretty good. Nerds loved it. But all of a sudden, they decided to put a framework, a user interface that the public could use. So I do have the technical capabilities of using the API, but I have other stuff going on. I never used it. Okay, I've known about it for a long time. I never used it. When ChatGPT came out though, all of a sudden I was like, okay, this is cool. So as you know, you add to a command prompt, and then from that command prompt comes a response. So actually, let me just real quick. I have their app that they have. Who is? Let's see if OpenAI knows who you are. Who is Josiah Neely? Yeah. I'm asking ChatGPT here. Oh, it thinks you're an economist, senior fellow, an energy policy expert, currently serving as the energy policy director at R Street. You also oversee the institute's work in the Southwest region of the United States. You have an expertise in energy policy, infrastructure, and climate adaptation, while advocating for limited government in those areas. Particularly involved in dimensions related to energy markets, renewable energy, and regulatory environment. Before joining R Street in 2014, you worked at TPP, Texas Policy Foundation, specializing in environmental and constitutional law. You also had a legal practice. You worked as a constitutional litigator and clerk for U.S. District Judge. You have a bachelor's degree in government and philosophy from UT and a law degree from Notre Dame. You're based in Austin, Texas, where you live with your family. Is there anything wrong there?
There are a couple of minor errors, but that's mostly accurate. For example, the place I worked was the Texas Public Policy Foundation. I think it said Texas Policy Foundation or something like that.
Okay.
It's a slight,
All right.
and then there are a couple other things that are like that. But that's basically accurate, I would say. Fairly impressive summary.
Yeah, I mean, right now I'd say actually I used 4.0 instead of the new one. Anyway, so the new one might be a little better, but usually it's at least high school, early college level. Usually a couple of errors, but generally it gets to just. And so this was like a huge revolution. I think one of the things is the revolution was the engagement from the public. Obviously, increases the utilization of the model, and this is obviously expensive, but you also learn from the customers in theory. So instead of just the data set, the training set, right? So this is a big deal. We know that this was particularly Sam Altman's idea. Sam Altman is the CEO of OpenAI, and this was his idea, not anybody else in the company apparently. And so after that, OpenAI's kind of like assessed value went way up. Sam Altman went on a round the world tour. He proposed, I think, to TSMC, raising $7 trillion. Okay, this sounds like a child is asking, because that's a lot of money to create semiconductor plants that create GPUs. Altman was pushed out last year by a kind of a EA inflected AI alarmists on the board. Then he came back. One of his one of his main chief scientists, Ilya left, and then like I think it was 6 months ago or 3 months ago, one of the other founders, Greg left, and now Mira Murati left. So then there was one. So it's just Altman, and he's at this like incredibly highly valued startup, which triggered a reaction from Google DeepMind. They were scrambling, and then the spin out Anthropic, which has Claude, is probably like the biggest rival, and Meta has its own Llama framework, which is open source. This whole industry basically exploded. We have an AI hype cycle. People are being paid incredibly large amounts of money to study and develop artificial intelligence, and so people are wondering what's going on. Well, what's going on is Sam Altman is taking it from nonprofit OpenAI, which was initially founded with Elon Bucks as a nonprofit, and he is now turning it into a profit. And I believe he's signing himself shares worth about $10 billion. So that's nice. So that's like the setting of what's going on, and maybe we could talk a little bit about the implications, and how this matters for society. What do you think, Josiah, as an outsider?
Yeah. So as a non-technical person, I will say, this does interact a little bit with my day job in that in the power sector for the last few decades in most of the country, electric demand has been flat or even kind of declining because America is kind of deindustrialized a little bit. We still do have population growth, but energy, like our appliances, other things have become efficiency has become a lot better. So because of that, you basically all the projections were flat or declining. Now, just in the last couple of years, that's been revised, and you have, in some cases, just really huge increased projections of like how much electric demand is going to grow, and most of it is just AI and crypto. because you need, in order to do the AI, you need, I guess, just like a lot of compute power. And so they're building data centers all over the place. And this, I think, is provoking, it's starting to provoke backlash from different groups, trying to do something to like limit this or tax it, or, so that could become I think, a bottleneck in terms of like, can you actually get the compute power that you need? I'm not sure. In terms of like the broader issues, I'm not a technical person, so I don't have any real assessments of like how plausible it is that you could achieve some sort of superhuman intelligence, functional computer type thing. It does seem kind of scary in a number of ways. I'm not sure that I would want Sam Altman in control of such a being, but then I'm not sure that I would want anyone in control of that either. It's a tricky issue because it seems like, it's sort of like building the atom bomb, right? I mean, you saw Oppenheimer, and one of the things in Oppenheimer and with the Manhattan Project is, well, we got to do it because if we don't, the Nazis might do it and they'll get the bomb, and then that would be bad for humanity or whatever, right? So that's the justification. Whenever anyone's like, well, is it really a good idea to build this like bomb that can destroy an entire city and inevitably could end humanity, through missiles and whatever? The response is, well, we've got to do it first because of the Nazis and later on because of the communists or whatnot. So now I think this is maybe an issue with AI too. In Europe, they have, I think, been a lot more cautious and put more restrictions in terms of this sort of stuff. And the result of that seems to be that they're just kind of getting left behind. And the US is maybe out in front, but if we were to try and restrict it, I'm sure China would come along behind us or somewhere else,
Yeah.
So I don't know that there's anything you can really. It's hard to think of anything that you could do to stop it.
Yeah. So I can. I'm not gonna most of them. I can't put names. I am in touch with people that are pretty close to. I mean, I'll just give an example, a generic example, which is actually true. So, but just as representative, I do know. I can't use names, but I know someone who is a family member of one of the executives at one of the top 3 companies. Okay, this is literally true. So I do know people who are close to the top and who've thought about it. So I'm gonna give some impressions. I was in SF actually. I was in San Francisco last weekend, hanging out with some people and kind of getting the AI scene. So basically, Europe doesn't matter. So Europeans, what they've traditionally tried to do is kind of hamstrung American corporations like Google with the right to know and other things. And, I don't always disagree with what Europeans are doing, but it's a little capricious, and it's really suppressed innovation on the continent. And it's basically just given Europeans a somewhat different experience, often like a broken experience. Some websites are now just not loading in Europe; they just don't want to deal with it. The American, large tech companies are just finally getting sick of it because Europe is a big market. But anyway, so Europe has used this economic power. It's not going to matter with AI because imagine, for example, that imagine that the American offices of I don't know, some European software company. Well, I guess it's Spotify. Okay, they can use artificial intelligence to do engineering, and then Spotify, I think its headquarters is in Sweden. They can't do it in Sweden because the EU bans it.
Right.
Well, they're just going to export all the engineers to the US.
Right.
Okay, so that's irrelevant. So that's one thing. Another thing is the main other concern is China. They're really the only country that has the resources to catch up. So as you indicate, electricity, compute is a rate limiter. So there's only about half a dozen institutions. So I'm going to say it that way in the world So like Amazon, obviously Amazon, because Amazon has AWS, Google, Microsoft, uh, maybe Anthropic and OpenAI, just because they have the head start, even though they're startups, quote unquote, they're worth billions now. But they've worked in this field. Well, OpenAI has backing of Microsoft, right? And then you have Meta, you have Facebook, former Facebook, and then you have Google. And so those are the ones. There's some Chinese ones that people don't know as well. They're kind of like a little behind. So the Chinese, they're a little behind America. I asked someone that's like pretty much well connected, well hooked up, and they basically told me what America decides will dictate it for the next half a decade, because we do have like a big enough lead. The Chinese cannot catch up right now because we're going too fast, and so they're always like a couple of steps behind us. Now, if we went full European, and just clamped down on it, yeah, they would catch up. So this does seem that the technology is going to improve inevitably. So the newest version of ChatGPT is considerable improvement. This really reminds me of the early browser wars with Netscape versus Explorer, and they were doing releases every 3 months, these sorts of things. They're really pushing hard. I will say it's almost 2 years, I think, since ChatGPT was released. The incredible economic bonanzas that some people were anticipating have not occurred. There were people who predicted the AGI, artificial general intelligence, would emerge, and we would be extinct. There's someone who I know actually, who's again like well connected in Bay Area circles, tech circles, who was in a private group chat predicting extinction within 7 months from ChatGPT. So obviously we're almost 2 years out. That's not happening. The issue is like it's mostly pretty good, just like with your bio. The problem is,
Right.
like if you're doing like mission critical code, 99% is not good enough. Like the system will crash, right?
Yeah.
And so right now, what AI is good for is writing a rough draft of a generic form letter.
Yeah.
Or like for example, for my Substack, I will like feed it. Sometimes I fed it like 5 paragraphs, and I'm like, give me 10 titles.
Right.
Now, the reality is like 7 of them are like just stupid, but 3 of them are like, okay, like I'll tweak that. So it's increasing people's productivity. I know people who got rid of editors because of AI. It's been good enough to get rid of editors, writing editors. So it's still not good enough. Actually, here's one thing. We've been talking mostly about LLMs and the textual stuff, but a lot of people are saying writers are not worried, but visual artists are worried. So there's like stable diffusion. There's types of artificial intelligence that are focused on visual, like taking your verbal prompt and creating visualizations, and those can be pretty good. One of the ones that I introduced, I think, to our circle is a Fellowship of the Rednecks, for example. That was pretty good. Like there was like little things, but like if you look at the hands looked correct. Like the visual stuff is getting really good. The main issue, I think, with like creating a full length movie is now just like compute. It would just be expensive, And so
music is also, I would say, gotten pretty good. I
Yeah.
mean, it's generic, but so you're not going to get anything that's like amazing. You're not going to get Freebird, you're not going to get Mozart, but you get something that's actually passable for what you could hear on the radio, a lot of which is not that good and overproduced anyway. So
I mean, our intro and outre are from Suno.
Correct, yeah. And in fact, there is an Easter egg. If you listen all the way to the end of our outro music or closing song or whatever, there is a little Easter egg in there about the AI generation.
Oh, okay.
I'll let anybody. I won't reveal it. Anyone who wants, listen and see.
So, I mean, I think it is going to change our lives in a lot of ways. So I just came back from SF. Waymos are all over the place now. Self-driving cars, right? So
one in my neighborhood just parked down the street.
I had one that was down the street. So, for those of you who, and I think this is a lot of, well, not a lot, but many of you do not live in large urban areas with large tech presence like Austin or SF. Self-driving cars, it's pretty clear now that they're going to be here in a lot of urban areas, and they will take on some of the. I mean, if you live in like rural Montana, I don't think it's going to be. I think self-driving trucking will probably
Yeah.
happen at some point. People have been talking about this for a decade now, and it's been like one of those things where it's like, we'll believe it when we see it because it just hasn't happened. Well, now it's happening. And so
Right.
Waymo is growing exponentially over the last 3 months. So by next summer, we're anticipating Waymos to be in like half a dozen large cities. And in SF, like we were like having dinner last Friday, and there was like 5 Waymos that were like lined up in the street. You know,
Mhm.
there's like Waymo flotillas going through San Francisco, picking people up and dropping them off. You know, so they just like they run in packs. The Waymos run in packs. Now this is probably not reassuring people when I say Waymo's running packs and artificial intelligence.
Right.
But Elon has been talking about it. AI plus robotics is finally starting to get here. I'm actually not super excited about robotics because like that's more scary to me. I think artificial intelligence is not embodied, and so it doesn't operate. It still needs humans, right?
Well,
But
maybe.
once it starts controlling robot bodies, then it's in the world,
Yeah.
you know,
I mean,
and it's just
they have like there already have been examples of where the AI gets humans to do things for it, right? I mean, you do a task rabbit.
oh yeah, TaskRabbit. If an AI decided to like take some initiative
Right.
and like use Amazon Turk and TaskRabbits and all these other things, it could get a lot done mischievously, you know. And that's part of the issue with AI is that they behave in ways that are unpredictable. So a lot of the conversations that I've had, a lot of the implicit uh, in our discussion is there's just like high uncertainty of what's going on. And like so now that OpenAI is nonprofit or for profit, we're going to be seeing a lot of change. We're going to see a lot of pushing. If the technology runs into a natural barrier, then it's over in terms of for a while at least.
Yeah.
There's the issue is like the LLMs, the quality of the data, the nature of the model. My understanding from talking to computer scientists and just listening to them over the years, they don't really know what's going on,
Right.
which is either good or bad. I don't know. But, so it could be like a lot of them did not anticipate ChatGPT 2 and 3 in terms of like the quantum leap, which was basically like they just like kept scaling up linearly. And then there was just like some sort of phase transition change. And all of a sudden it's like a human that's scaring people, So we
Right.
don't know what could happen with, like 5 or 6. There's a lot of people who think, not a lot of people, there's some people who think AGI will be here in 2027, But I mean, that's a minority viewpoint, but it's not a crazy viewpoint.
Ivanka Trump, I think.
Well, I know people. Yeah, I know people. I mean, this is like a little bit of tea, but not too much tea. But I mean, there are people who are AI doomers. Well, Elon's an AI doomer. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
And so they are trying to get to Trump and his circle to raise awareness about AI.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that's been a thing that I've heard over the last 6 months, and I guess it finally happened. Ivanka decided to like tweet out Leopold Ashton, whatever his name is, just
Right.
like situational awareness. Watch the interview with Dorkesh Patel. I will say a lot of people. There are people that I know, people that I trust, who think like Leopold is a little bit overrated. His that he's a little bit overrated with his warning. So I don't know.
Yeah.
This is a complicated field. You'll hear a lot about it. I guess what I would say is, if someone expresses a lot of confidence, they're full of it.
Right.
No one should. We're living in the age of the rise of the machine mind, basically, and so it's pretty weird. And like our priors are not guiding us well. Like like I had friends that were not alarmed, but like very, very curious about what was happening out with the GPT framework of OpenAI, like around like 2016, 2017, early on, because they beat, like GPT, I think it won at Go, Like that was a big deal.
Right.
Anyway, the point is, DeepMind want to go, DeepMind want to go. But in any case, the point is like this was like a nerd obsession up until 2 years ago. Now this is a broadly cultural obsession. I mean, people are using it to generate images.
Yeah.
Translators are going out of business. It's affecting people on the margins. I think 5 years from now there will be some serious effects happening, and I don't know. It's gonna be really interesting. Some of them are gonna be good. Some of them are gonna be bad. For example, let me just give you inadvertent things. Laws have become way way longer since word processors were invented.
Right.
You can imagine a thing where an AI allows people to digest large amounts of text,
Yeah.
and so people are just like, oh well, we can write it as convoluted and long as we want to now
Right.
because we'll just have an AI like digest the text for them. But basically, people will be like where they would be if the laws were of manageable size in the first place.
No.
It's just like ratchet upward. So I do worry about that sort of thing. Some of you guys who are in technology and engineering know that some of like the code editors and visual code editors and other things that are supposed to help, they do help, but they also encourage or they allow for sloppy engineering, which in the short term, okay, you get your product out faster, but over the long term, it makes the product hard to sustain, and the code more buggy. So there might be like pretty banal short term consequences of people just being sloppy. We'll see. But yeah, space to watch. And Sam Altman is kind of a Machiavellian figure, so there's going to be some drama in the press over the next 6 months about what's going on because I'm assuming OpenAI is going to really accelerate, which means the other companies have to decide whether they accelerate.
Yeah. Or take him out, right? Before it's too late.
Well, I think actually,
I'm not advising that. I'm just.
well, not the taking out, but candidly, I think both. I've heard both the Democrats and the Republicans view artificial intelligence as a national security issue, and no matter who wins, the major companies in the U.S. are gonna have to deal with talking to the representatives of the people, right, of the United States, because um, it's a big deal.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah. So I guess we get to our next topic. Car seats. Our nerd hero in chief, JD Vance. What's going on with him? I mean, I feel like I'm gonna say before we get into it though, and I'll let you introduce the car seat thing. But of the four candidates, we know who Trump is. Kamala, like, okay, I know that like a lot of right wing people find her annoying, but I think she is actually pretty relatable for a lot of Americans. I think if you remove your ideologically or partisan, goggles off, she is, for example, a much more sympathetic and relatable person than Hillary Clinton. Just public affect and mannerisms and everything like that. But she's pretty generic still. And then Tim Walz, yeah, he's just not. I don't find him super interesting because he's kind of a LARP. He's like a live action role player for like, he's like salt of the earth, rural American who also has every single progressive view known to mankind. Right. So he's like a type. He's a type.
Yeah.
Whereas JD Vance, I feel is like he's a real person who has real thoughts, who's read real things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know. People say that he's a politician. He changed his views, and the Paris is literally worth a mass for JD. You know what I'm saying? But when he pops off about stuff like car seats actually increased fatalities or increased number of deaths, it shows you that he's actually a relatively deep thinker who engages with social science literature, right? So
okay, well, yeah, let me explain this for people who haven't been following. Again, I think this was an old comment. I think this was like a him running for office comment, but JD Vance in an interview had made a comment about how increasing child car seat requirements. So like how old the kid has to be before they can actually sit in the car without a booster seat or something like that has gone way up. When I was a kid, Razib, back in the 80s, maybe you had the same experience. I don't need, like, at that point, the seatbelt laws had come into effect, but even they were still pretty new. But we were just like in the car, you just get in the car, you're in the back seat. Honestly, a lot of times you don't even
Pack yourself in,
yeah,
kids.
you get all your stuff. And honestly, like a lot of the time, we were not even in our seatbelts all the time.
Remember station wagons?
Yeah, exactly.
Station wagons are kind of illegal because you can't use them the way people use them.
Right.
The way people use them is they would pack small children in the back.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Or you would like, sleep back there, road trips, whatever. I did that.
I remember that.
Yeah. So there is a study, it's fairly famous in terms of like academic studies, suggesting that car seats, the increase in car seat requirements had a measurable negative effect on fertility. So one thing that you find when you have kids is the car seats are kind of like big and bulky. And in general, the more kids you have, like you need to get a bigger car. But especially, it can be hard to fit even 3 car seats, right, in a car. You can do it. There are special smaller car seats that you can find or whatever. But I found when we had our third child, it got to be a little tricky finding like, do we need to get a bigger vehicle just to manage this whole thing? So they looked at, in the study, they kind of look at like when these different child car seat requirements went into effect in different parts of the country and what effect that had on fertility. And basically, I think what they found is that per year, the car seats saved like 60 lives in terms of kids, fewer kids dying in accidents, but 8,000 fewer children a year were born, right? So it's just like massively more people do not exist because of these car seat requirements than are saved from the reduction in accidents. Okay, so that's the study. As with any study, people can go back and forth about it. Like, is it, quibble, all sorts of things. But it's a respectable thing. Anyway, so JD Vance mentions this, and to some extent, like people kind of freak out and say, "Oh, this is like him being weird again." There was a Snopes article about it. I've started to see, I think, even people who are not fans of JD Vance, starting to get tired of this a little bit, because this is now, I would say, the third or fourth time where Vance has just mentioned some research, academic finding, what, like we talked before about him in a conversation, and EboPsych finding about, grandparents and alloparenting came up and people freaked out about that. There have been a couple other ones. There was one, he was in an interview and he basically, you could tell he was kind of alluding to the David Hackett Fisher, Colin Woodward, American Nations thing. He's talking about how, American history was kind of a battle between Yankees and Southern Bourbons, and the hillbillies, as he called them, the borderers, would like switch back and forth, and whoever the hillbillies were on the side of tended to win, right? And so Jeet here, is it Jeet here, her, was saying that like this was him embracing like neo-Confederate ideology or whatever, which is just stupid. Anyway, so there've been a bunch of stuff like this where, he said, like, he's obviously a guy who's interested in ideas. He's read the literature, as they say, and he brings it up and people kind of attack him for it. And I have started to see various people who are not even fans of JD Vance who are kind of getting tired of it. They're like, look, I don't like JD Vance necessarily, but you do like, don't we want politicians who like read and understand what's going on? That doesn't seem like it should be something that you should be attacking someone for. Hopefully there would be more of that. So that's kind of the situation. It does get I was thinking, ironically, this made me think of a semi-related incident. You might remember back in one of the debates, the Democratic primary debates in 2020, Joe Biden was talking about like education or whatnot, and he said something about how, if you're black or poor, you should leave the phonograph. I think you might have said like the phonograph or the record player on at night so kids hear more words because that will help them in school or something. And that, like, people were like, what is Joe Biden talking about? That's weird. And I, of course, recognized, okay, there was another study, which was also semi-famous, although I don't think it replicated. But this study found that children in low socioeconomic households were exposed. They just heard a lot fewer words than children in upper socioeconomic households. It was like 3 million fewer words by age 5, something like that. I don't know. And so the theory was that the lagging economic performance from from kids who grew up in lower socioeconomic households was due to this fact that they just were, they heard a lot fewer words. Parents were not talking to their kids or whatever. So that, I think, like, in Biden's mind, it's clear, like, he heard that and then he kind of translates like, okay, well, what do you got to do? You got to get them hearing the words, play the tape players, at night. So kind of got garbled a little bit, but maybe that was another example. Joe Biden in general, I don't know that he's a guy who reads the literature, but in that case, at least he had been exposed to it. So there's a lot of things about that. In general, I guess with American politics, the answer is maybe if you have like thoughts or if you read books or whatnot, maybe it's better if you pretend that you don't. You hide the fact, at least during the campaign, because it only seems to have a downside. But do we want to live in that world to the extent that you personally can affect things? Do you want to encourage that world? I do not. I'd rather a world where people were smart and well informed.
Yeah, I think our friend Dick Anania has an idea that basically people like dumber candidates or dumber presenting candidates. So there's been arguments on Kamala's intelligence. She's clearly not brilliant. She's clearly less intelligent than her sister, to be candid, if you just look at where she went to law school and her career arc. Trump, there's arguments about his intelligence, but he's not like Pete Buttigieg or JD.
Yeah.
He's not like a hard, he probably is more like John Kerry. John Kerry is not dumb, but he was never like really a real intellectual in university. Arguably, George W. Bush is the same. Obama had some affectations. Gore had some. Anyway, set that aside. Okay, so people like the fact that Trump, Walz, and Kamala seem kind of dumb because they're mostly dumb. Whereas just JD, like, sometimes, like, I'm gonna say it, he's weird.
Right.
Really, really, this is what, like, some people have been angry about, saying that JD is weird, is that he's a nerd, and that's the fundamental problem. He's a nerdy guy.
Right. I think there is I think people do want. It does seem like voters want someone who is relatable, say, and that, I think, plays out more in terms of cultural affectations than it does actual intelligence. Bush versus Kerry, for example, they both went to the same school. They both went to Yale. their test scores, I think Bush was actually a little bit better than
higher.
Kerry's. Yeah.
According to Steve Saylor.
Yeah. But they were in the same ballpark, so I imagine they're probably
They're both high midwits.
correct. Yeah. But Kerry had his manner was a lot more aloof, and George Bush, his cultural mannerisms and other things, even if he was a guy who, grew up as the grandson of a senator and the son of a president and went to Andover and Yale or whatever.
I mean, no, yeah, Bush was by lineage. Let's be clear, he's a Connecticut. He's
Right.
he's a Connecticut Yankee, and both his parents were like
Yes.
upper class wasps.
Right.
His paternal lineage descends from Episcopal priests or ministers, right? So,
Right.
Pretty much out of central casting for the type of people that you would see at I don't know, was it like that? In prep school movies, that's what the Bushes were before they moved to Texas.
Yeah, but despite all of that, he would still say nuclear, or
Yeah, I think some. Well, I mean, his brother doesn't have an accent, and his brother is younger than him. It's clearly part.
Jeb is older.
No, I think Jeb is younger.
Is he?
Right.
Right.
That's what the theory is. Jeb was a little smarter, but he didn't go to Yale because it was after it was
right.
Jeb.
You're right. Yes,
Jeb was going to be going when the meritocratic regime increased the threshold for legacies.
Right.
Well, whereas George W. Bush got it just in time. But yeah, I mean, like, look, if I lived in Midland for 30 years, I would sound different. So Midland, just so people know, I mean, George H.W. Bush, the late George H.W. Bush, he's kind of based out of Houston.
Right.
But for George W., in the oil business, he lived in Midland for a long time. Midland is in West Texas. It's close to New Mexico. It's basically almost New Mexico. So Texas is a big state.
Yeah.
And Midland is definitely like the West ranching whatever area. And George W. he lives in Dallas now.
Yeah, I would describe the way I would describe it is the way that Texas is to the rest of America, West Texas is to the rest of Texas. So it's like a concentrated Texas, Midland or whatever.
Yeah, all the cliches don't really apply to the eastern half.
Yeah, well, there's some that apply. I mean, it's
barbecue, and big house.
Yeah,
but I mean, it's like that's the area of Texas that's like got the huge sprawling ranches and very few people.
Yeah,
Lubbock, Midland, Amarillo. It's like the hybrid between the South and the West. Really, it's more Western. Feels more Western. So, but anyway, so he has an accent, and like he created an affect of kind of a dumb guy, but he's really not dumb. Whereas Kerry kind of was the opposite, where he was like created an affect of being smarter. Actually, the most famous person, and I know this from Steve Saylor's like talked about this. Adlai Stevenson, who ran twice in the 1950s, presented as an intellectual, but actually, objectively, he was almost certainly dumber than Eisenhower,
yes.
who affected an aw shucks like relatable personality. And apparently, after Adlai Stevenson died, because Adlai Stevenson was from a very storied lineage, like he had ancestors who were governors and stuff like that. I think one of his kids was a senator. Anyway, one of his sons was Adlai Stevenson III or something. But it was like the book that was found at his bedside was The Social Register.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
So he was actually kind of a bimbo. He's a bimbo, ironically.
Yeah, where Eisenhower, I think he had some sort of engineering background.
He's a military guy.
Right. Because, there are incidents where people would like come to him and be talking about like missiles or whatever. And he would say, well, no, that's not right because, you can only get this much thrust from, this much fuel or whatever. I'm not, honestly, I don't have that background, so I can't even make up an example.
Well, I mean, okay, the other recent engineer that we've had as president,
Jimmy Carter.
He also kind of he didn't sound super smart, and I think part of it is like Bill Clinton, for example. Like he was like he was Bill Clinton, but he could sound smart, But what people have said, and these are people that are Democrats, is that he always sounded kind of smarter about anything than he really was. Like, so for example, he was really enthusiastic about science,
Right.
but like some of the stuff that he would say about science, it was like, if you knew the science, it's like Star Trek science talk.
Right.
Like he can lingo, the feel. So Bill Clinton's trained as a lawyer, and he's just very good at communicating and talking. And so he sounded smarter than Jimmy Carter. But Jimmy Carter was a nuclear engineer in the Navy.
Right.
Jimmy Carter would know how stuff works. Clinton doesn't know how stuff works, and Clinton has admitted he's not good at math. He's a word cell is the way we would define it in 2024 parlance. So there's a huge gap between perception and reality, and it's just how it is. And the presidency, a lot of it's about marketing and personal brand, right?
That's right. Yeah, and I do think now you've got me thinking. Really, ever since Jackson versus John Quincy Adams, I think that's probably the first case where you have the smarter candidate defeated by the less intelligent candidate. Sorry to all the Andrew Jackson stands out there, but I think it's fair to say that John Quincy Adams probably smarter than Andrew Jackson.
Well, I mean, I think Andrew Jackson would be proud because he'd be like, he might be smarter, but I could put a gun in his face and kill him or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But Andrew Jackson was not actually a poor. I mean, he went through phases where he didn't have much money, but he was actually not from a super poor family, and by the time he was the backcountry aristocracy. But by the time he was running for president or earlier as a general, he was a pretty well off, prosperous person. But again, he had Trump is similar. He had a affect that connected him to the populace. I mean, a little bit Andrew Jackson, he probably wouldn't say it this way because he wasn't as classically educated, but a little bit like Caesar. He's like a pretty prosperous elite person fundamentally in terms of his material status and what he had achieved, but he connected with the masses and could engage very, very well in demagoguery that a lot of his colleagues found to be beneath them.
Right. Yeah. So this is so now I'm thinking of what are the cases where the smarter candidate beat the less intelligent candidate? Obviously the ones that are coming to my mind are the opposite, where the smarter candidate loses. FDR, I think you have to say, even a lot of his fans would say he had a first-rate temperament, third-rate intellect.
The classic gentleman C.
Correct, gentleman C. Whereas Hoover, again, did have an engineering background. I'm not talking about his, ideas as president or whatever, but he was probably a pretty smart guy. Kennedy versus Nixon. If you listen to Nixon in private, he obviously is a very smart, well-read guy. Kennedy, I mean, you hear different things about it, but you can read his admissions essay to Harvard, and he doesn't.
Well, Kennedy famously didn't write the book that he got the Pulitzer or whatever for.
Yeah. He had other people doing all the work for him or whatever. Eisenhower, I guess, Eisenhower's smarter than Stevenson, we would say, although it didn't appear that way.
Carter was probably smarter than Ford.
Carter was probably smarter than Ford. He did pull that off. Yeah. Although, and Clinton, was probably smarter than George H.W. Bush, although it was
close. It was close.
Yeah,
because from what I remember, H.W. got his econ degree in 3 years at Yale. He wasn't especially G.W. was sounds like George W. Bush wasn't really stupid. His issue was focus and conscientiousness. He was also clearly a drug addict or had substance abuse problems. So that his dad was not like that at all. His dad was very straight and narrow.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then and Pro also, I imagine, was fairly smart, although I don't know that much about. I'd have to look up his background or whatever, but he was like a
military guy. Then he got into computers.
Right. Yeah. So that's your base rate suggests he's got to have something going on upstairs, I guess.
Yeah, and I think so. I think one thing that's different about JD though, aside from his raw, he probably does have the best raw horsepower. Is he's very intellectually curious.
Right. Yeah.
And he he does read weird stuff. He does defend reading weird stuff and engaging with weird stuff. Just like he is kind of one of those, right wing edgelord elder millennials, and he doesn't really apologize too much for it. And I think that's causing a little, especially in like kind of like the press corps, it's just causing some issues.
Yeah, I mean, I'm biased in all sorts of ways, but I don't know. I kind of think that that's good. It was amusing a while ago. Apparently, the Trump campaign was hacked by the Iranian government, and one of the things that they stole was the Oppo dossier on JD Vance when they were doing the vetting for his potential VP pick for Trump. And whoever stole it had been shopping it around to various media outlets, none of which were going to run it. And yesterday or Wednesday, someone just published it on their own Substack, right? Ended up getting suspended from Twitter for it, actually.
Yeah, it was Ken Klippenstein.
Ken Klippenstein, yeah. So I'm curious. So I went and took a look, and I'm not saying, I don't want to cast any aspersions on the ironclad integrity of the different journalists who refused to publish this, but there really wasn't anything there that was juicy. I could see how someone would if someone gives this to you, really the only story is the fact that it was hacked, because it's basically just page after page of JD Vance does not support student loan forgiveness. JD Vance has taken this public position on Ukraine. JD Vance has taken this public position. There's nothing. There's nothing there in terms of seedier stuff. And then what is there is just basically all his political positions that you knew about, right? So it does not seem that there are any skeletons in Vance's closet in that sort of way. He just seems like a normal guy who is interested in this sort of stuff.
Yeah, so there's gonna be a debate at some point. So one of my group chats, people are like, "Oh, JD is gonna wipe the floor with Tim Walz." I mean, maybe at the points. Walz does a good bluster, and ultimately, I don't think vice presidential debates. I mean, if presidential debates don't really matter, vice presidential debates really don't matter. But I think we should let's do the paywall part here, where we are on the election. I'll be honest. I look at the models, but it really looks like. Hope you enjoyed the podcast so far. To listen to the rest of it, please go to conversation.substack.com.
Two minds met on a summer's eve, each with truths they long believed. Words flowed like a winding stream as hours passed in deep debate. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. In listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. They spoke of justice, spoke of change, of history's weight and future's range. Their views at first seemed worlds apart, but patience bridged the divide. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. In listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. They spoke of justice, spoke of change, of history's weight and future's range. Their views at first seemed worlds apart, but patience bridged the divide. who's wrong or right, but understanding others right. In civil discourse we can find ties that gently bind. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see the shared humanity. As dawn broke soft on dewy grass, they smiled and shook hands at last. Two souls enriched by reason talk, united in respect. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see the shared humanity. This folk song captures the essence of a long, thoughtful discussion between two public intellectuals. It emphasizes the power of patient listening, mutual respect, and the discovery of common ground. The gentle tone reflects the common understanding they reach after their debate. Would you like me to expand on any aspects of